Hello and welcome to Your Property Empire. I'm Chris Gray. On tonight's show, why could you be responsible for the whole mortgage when you pair up with a friend or relative to buy an investment property together? What is a relocation loan and how risky are they? And with the big four banks getting stricter on serviceability, what can you do to increase your chances of getting a loan? But first up, there's been a lot of talk about investing in Brisbane over recent years, yet the city really hasn't performed as well as Sydney and Melbourne. So what's the reason for this? Well, joining me tonight to comment on our stories is John Mansamelli from Hunterwood Solutions Mortgage Brokers and Charles Tarbey, Chairman and owner of Century 21 Australasia. So, John, what's the reason for the poor performance in Brisbane?
How long have we got?
Not long.
Long time, Charles. Look, there's a lot of things. I think I put it down to 4 points, and you'd know more than I would, Charles. But I think we forget that the state government, the state government shredded a lot of public sector jobs, and we've forgotten about that, and we're still seeing the remnants of that. And when you see a population of 1.5 million, and you see 100,000 public sector jobs cuts, you know someone who knows someone who's lost their job. So that was one point. The second point, obviously, is the floods took the wind out of the sails in the market over there. And then the mining downturn. The mining obviously had an effect on the market. Not as bad as WA, but obviously had an effect. And then finally, the concentration of building in that inner city environment really sucked the too much supply and not enough demand. So there's four points there. Charles,
no, they're all pretty strong reasons, and also the overall economy of the state isn't as good as, say, New South Wales or Victoria. And that helps too. As people worry about the guys were talking earlier on about South Australia, that particular state hasn't had any population growth. West Australia's had negative population movement in it, and those sorts of things do impact. If you end up with supply trickling in, the population reducing, the jobs reducing, it does. It changes the whole spectrum. And that's why Sydney has continued to be so strong, because realistically, if you can't get a job in Sydney, there's something terribly wrong. And as we know, with the vacancy rates on property, they're just so low. And you can almost gauge a market based on vacancy rates. You can look at one market and say the vacancy rate's up here, so you know there's problems in that state. Or you can look at what's happening in Sydney and you can go, wow, how do I get into this state? Or how did I get into this state? one of those.
It's a comedy channel every week.
One of those things. So,
John, obviously we go in cycles, so is something likely to change in the future?
Well, look, some interesting data came out, and I'll bring it up on the
We'll
screen.
bring up a graph, yeah.
Yeah, Macquarie Bank brought out some data. It was quite interesting. If you have a look at the data, there was this graph showing in 87, 88, where in the bottom left-hand corner, if you look up, you can see that the differential between Brisbane and Sydney was 2.2. Now, if you go back to 02, there's another peak where the differential is 02. And now what's happening, Macquarie Bank is saying, yep, the differential is hitting its historical peak of 2.2. So
that's effectively, so just in basic terms, that means Sydney is 2.2 times the price of Brisbane.
Yeah, that's right. So it's remarkable to think that you can still buy a beautiful home for $700,000 in Brisbane when that's almost unheard of.
And that's the part you've got to watch, and people weren't watching very closely, where Melbourne and Brisbane, and even Perth, got close to Sydney's median price. At one stage, Perth was almost there.
Taking over, yeah.
And you've got to really look at that.
Yeah.
It's a classic example of, in my area, in the old days, we'd sell somebody's house for X dollars, and they go to Brisbane and buy a better house for less, and they have cash in the bank and a double garage and a swimming pool. And that actually disappeared for a little while.
Yeah.
And it needs to come back for that balance to occur.
Well, it's Macquarie Bank. We're actually pointing that out very well.
Because in reality is how many people will move? Because everyone said that in the GFC, the UK's half price now, why wouldn't you move to the UK? Why would you? Like, unless you've got an umbrella and the rest of it. At least Brisbane's got sunnier weather on its side.
He can say all of those
better
things.
sense of humour too.
He can say all of those things. He can. Very funny people, aren't they? They're very funny.
But Macquarie Bank were basically making a call now, saying that we're hitting historical price differentials between Brisbane and Sydney and Melbourne, and that historically closes very quickly once it hits around the 2.2. So that graph was an interesting graph.
And so I think the next one we've got that we can pull up is the interstate migration as well.
Yeah. So moving on from that, we'll bring up that graph. So if you look at the bottom right-hand corner, you will see that there is a blip coming up, starting to happen quite strongly. And so what that is saying is that there is now a net outflow from Victoria and Sydney into the market in Brisbane. And that's basically those people who can sell up their properties for an absolute fortune, as Charles has mentioned, and they go and buy a beautiful home with a pool for cash and leave money in their bank account. And so that top right-hand corner where you're seeing that graph escalate, that's the difference between the price differential between Sydney and Melbourne and Brisbane, and the net flows going back in there. So there is an upturn. Is it a trend? Is it a recent thing? Is it going to continue? I don't know, but it's definitely something to monitor.
And so, Charles, for some of these people, because obviously you would have a lot of agencies in Brisbane, so you'd be seeing it, would this be retirees retiring over there, or would you get kind of 30 or 40-year-olds saying, look, it's just too hard, we'll go up to Brisbane, we might not earn as much money, but we can get a lot more satisfaction?
You're getting a lot of investment, a lot of young people saying, oh, well, I've got to go to Brisbane, it's the only place I can afford. So they're out there looking as well. So you've got that, you've got the people who are moving because of the equity they've gained here, you've got that also. And you've also got people in Melbourne using the equity they've got to buy investment properties in Hobart, as an example, or in Tasmania. So it's that equity that they're using. But also the Brisbane market is still, in terms of stock, it has more stock sitting around than Sydney and Melbourne for sure. So there's a better opportunity to bargain and negotiate now, whereas that opportunity we haven't seen in the Sydney market for a very long time.
Now, a lot of speculators have been calling that there's going to be a massive drop in the market, and a lot of people are saying, well, it's probably in those areas where there is brand new stock and thousands of apartments in the same buildings. In your experience, for both of you, the Brisbane people would know, the interstate probably not. Where are those areas of that massive supply?
Well, what my understanding is it's at the inner 2-kilometre radius, so it's your South Brisbane that comes down into Fortitude Valley, potentially down into Newstead and up into Bowen Hills, and the concentration seems to be in that point. There's also the Chermside, which is 10 kilometres north. It's a bit like a little mini CBD, and there's a lot of concentration there. But if you were looking at other areas outside of those particular locations, there doesn't seem to be that much building going on. So if I agree with your philosophy, we try and buy within the 10-kilometre radius. And if you avoid those two areas and looking at the Summerhill version of Brisbane, there's no supply going in there. So, yeah, what do you think?
Well, some of the apartment complexes that come up through south of the river as well, all up through Highgate Hill and those areas, they're south of the city. But that was an area earmarked for massive apartment development. And I know that there's a lot being sold but still hasn't come out of the ground. Indooroopilly is another area where you've got these apartment complexes coming out. So there might be, if there's going to be an oversupply, it's not going to happen in the Sydney market, not certainly in the CBD. Sydney may be outlying. You might get some
in here. And
Melbourne copped it very badly before in the Docklands area, so there's a chance that they might get hit with an oversupply. But Brisbane's got a chance of an oversupply in apartments. Probably from most of the three capital cities we talk about.
If I may add, Charles, there was this Macquarie data that came out. The analysts are saying that they're expecting, because of this migration, they're expecting an extra 20 to 25,000 people a year for the next 3 years. Yeah, coming out of New South Wales and Victoria, chasing the dream in Brisbane. Yeah, and so they're suggesting that maybe the supply is starting to be soaked up.
Gold Coast and hinterland as well. A lot of people are buying the Gold Coast and hinterland now, so it's starting to move along.
So again, you've got to watch what you buy. Yeah. Some stuff will go up, some might go down. Well, let's jump into your auction clearance numbers, Charles.
Yes, it puts everything to shame, doesn't it? All the comments that were made 4 or 5 weeks ago about the market reaching the peak. Oh, wow. Well, Sydney was totally over the top now. 80.2% for Sydney, Chris. The actual clearance rates across the country was 77.2%. This time last week it was 76. The week before it was 75. So it's actually gone up since they spoke about it. Melbourne came in at 79.2%. Every single capital city was higher than this time last year, and in some cases substantially. So this time last year we were talking about the boom still going, and here we are now in a better marketplace. Fewer buyers in the marketplace, but you only need one person to turn up an auction.
Yeah.
Interesting to see that number. I've been overseas. I just flew in this morning. I had someone call me, a journalist, saying front page of the Telegraph apparently on Saturday was, is this the end of the market or the turning of the market? And suddenly the clearance rates have gone up.
Yeah, look, there's fewer people, fewer interest, but what they haven't factored in was that there was a significant number of people looking before these people started to change their mind. And we weren't servicing that demand. So the demand is still there. It's not as high, but you don't need it any higher than what it is today.
Sure. So what about homes advertised for sale?
Yeah, good. We've 3 weeks in a row, plus 0.68%. So, you know, the last 3 weeks we've called it up. That's also a good sign. So when you've got that moving along with fewer people out in the marketplace, then I think we might see a softening, but it's not going to see a massive change. Our friend's back out again talking about a crash in the Australian real estate market. This seminars,
Dent?
Mr Dent's got seminars up and down the coast again, and he will
Advertising
be right.
on Facebook these days.
He will be right one day, but, you know, I guess we're all part of cycles, aren't we?
And moving on to the rent price movements.
Yeah, that's down 0.93% this week, but the best capital city, believe it or not, was Hobart. There you go.
That's
Hobart.
been coming up.
It's been coming up a lot. So we still haven't had a lot of movement from going back a couple of years. It's the only increase 2.16% from 24 months ago as an average rent. So it's not brilliant, but it's still pretty good.
I'm going to Hobart for the first time ever in about 3 or 4 weeks.
Fantastic.
I'll report
beautiful
in, Charles.
City. Absolutely beautiful city.
Residential vacancy rates.
Yeah, they're really good. Sydney again, 0.55. That's just been one of the best performers. Melbourne, 1.05. But sadly, Perth, which went up to 10s, came back into the 7s, this week is back to 9.72. So the vacancy rate's 3.77. I always say clearance rates when it comes to vacancy rates. What it is, 3.77 for those 3 capital cities. I really, really do hope Perth recovers, because the amount of return on rental properties is diminishing, but so too are the prices been dropping. So at some point in time, the yield is just going to get so much better and well worth a very good look at.
Wonderful. Sounds good. Just before we close off the Brisbane, any particular areas that you're looking at, John?
In Brisbane?
Yeah.
Look, as usual, I'm very conservative. I do like the inner 10-kilometre ring. I don't like to deviate from that. I tend to think the affluence is there. I tend to think the restaurants, the cafes, the work is there. So, you know, your Cooperoo, your Green Hill, yeah, those sorts of areas. Up around the other side, the Gap.
And would you still go for units up in Brisbane, or more to a townhouse house?
You have to be very careful with units. I think there's just so much opportunity buying an old house and renovating it. There is opportunity to make money in units, don't get me wrong, but you have to be very, very careful. Why would you not consider buying an old house and renovating it, or at least getting a townhouse? Along the water, I think the Redlands area has just been flying under the radar for a very long time. Thornlands has got a 1.4% vacancy rate. It's averaged around 7% per annum for the last 20 years. It's a very meat and three potatoes type, type environment. Doesn't do anything fancy, but it just keeps clocking away. And you can get townhouses there, brand new townhouses, for $410,000.
Yeah. So, Charles, meat and 2 veg, or a house or a unit?
No, mate, a vegetarian. And
what's wrong with you, Charles?
I would say that every capital city in Australia and every regional centre is special to buy in Australia right now. Depends what you want and how much you can afford. I think all of them have got something special for a particular buyer, and I think they've all still got reasonable growth, and some of them that are hitting the bottom are going to start to climb.
All right, thanks for joining us, Charles. Now, we're going to take a short break. We'll be back soon.
Feelings of love, yeah, feelings of...
Australia's most satisfied shoppers 3 years in a row, even though you need a coin for your trolley. That's good different.
I want to create your holiday as if it were my own.
I want the A-list treatment.
I want to feel the sand between my toes.
I want the freedom to explore my way. I want to see this great country of ours.
Whatever you want, we can create your dream holiday. Escape Travel, tailor-made.
Discover why Volvo is one of the world's fastest growing luxury car brands this end of financial year. With great offers across the range, now is the time to forge your own path.
Does your investment property insurance cover damage caused by tenants? Terry Shear Landlord Insurance includes cover for damage by tenants and loss of rental income as standard. Call Terry Shear, Australia's leading landlord insurance specialist, for a quote.
The NBN network comes with the choice of super fast speeds. Asking your service provider for a plan and speed that suits your needs is a vital part of transforming your online experience into something spectacular. Let's take a look. Plans based on NBN 25 are perfect to browse the web, watch videos and send email. Superfast NBN 50 lets your whole household stream HD video, play games and work from home too. Then there's NBN 100, superfast internet without constant buffering. It's perfect for multi-device households who want to browse, stream 4K media and send and receive large files all at the same time. Oh, and if you only use a home phone or basic internet, there's NBN 12, which is about the same speed as ADSL2 today. As NBN is a wholesaler, your actual speeds are determined by your internet service provider, along with things like your equipment and location. Go online to find out more about the speed that suits your needs, then purchase your plan through an internet provider.
Kia Sorento is tuned for Australian conditions. It's been tested on the harshest of roads, from inner city to outback, so that ride and handling is second to none. Kia Sorento, it's made for Australia.
Those who want clever economics from a social democratic perspective head to Professor John Quiggin, a thinker from the University of Queensland with provocative ideas on the state of Australia and Adani. Join me tonight, Sky News Business.
Welcome back to Your Property Empire. Well, joining me on the show tonight is John Mansamelli from Huntwood Solutions Mortgage Brokers. Now, we had a few viewer questions in during the week, and so I thought I'd put a few rapid-fire ones to John that are around the topic of mortgages. Now, the first question we had was, I bought a property a few years ago with my mate to get started on the property ladder. Now that I'm married and want to buy a home to live in, the bank I am dealing with is telling me that I'm responsible for the entire debt and will only use half the rental income. I can't buy a home now. It doesn't seem fair. Is there a way around this? And that's Paul from Cairns. Now, this is a classic thing that most people never understand before they get in.
Yeah, a lot of first homeowners are going to be in this situation because they've decided to get on the property ladder that way, you know, jumping in with their mate. So it's a really, Paul, it's a great question. It's a really topical question. So what I'd suggest you do is go and find a broker who understands the common debt reducer product. Now, the way the common debt reducer product works is when you go to buy your new matrimonial home, what you want is to also get the pay slips from your mate that you bought the property with. And the reason why you want to do that is there are a couple of lenders who, if you can prove that your mate can service the entire, or his or her side of the debt, then they won't put all the burden onto you. So find a broker who will help you understand the common debt reducer products. There's basically two lenders at the moment, and if your mate can just present a couple of income pay slips, then the bank will see that your mate can service the debt, and therefore you'll be assigned half the debt and still use the rental income, and you won't be penalised. The Big Four won't do it, so yeah.
And so the whole concept behind this, so that the viewers understand the logic, is if Paul and his mate John, or whatever his name is, bought $1 million property, they thought they're doing $500,000 each, but they're both on $1 million joint mortgage. If John suddenly disappears overseas and you can't find him, the bank still is owed $1 million on that property, so of course they're going to come after Paul. Whereas if they completely separate it, then it's a different thing.
Yeah, so there are some innovative products that have just come out to recognise that, you know, you shouldn't be penalised, like Paul was saying there. What we're trying to do is find those lenders who want to help you. And unfortunately, most people going into that type of arrangement don't understand that's going to affect them down the track. So find a good broker who will understand that common debt reducer product so that you're not getting penalised, that you will only be assigned half of the debt and all of the income.
Wonderful.
That
Sounds good. Now, the next question was, I want to take advantage of the Sydney market and upgrade my home. I found something that I'd like to buy and move into, but need to sell my home to reduce the mortgage. I've heard of relocation loans, but never really had anyone explain it to me. And they thought it was risky. This is Eugene from Sydney. And look, this is a classic dilemma. Do you sell your home first and then go and buy and then maybe spend a long time? Or do you go and find the dream home and then go and do it? So
yeah, and in markets like Sydney and Melbourne, you almost have to jump on it straight away. Once you've done your due diligence, you have to move straight away. So relocation loans, bridging loans, they're the same thing. And how it works... who was it again? It was Eugene. So how it works, Eugene, is the bank will lend you the purchase price and the stamp duty and also keep your existing debt in place. Now, what the bank is looking for is lending you 80% of the properties combined, so 80% loan-to-value ratio. Now, some lenders will assess you on what's called peak debt, and some lenders will assess you on what's called end debt. So the idea is that you're able to move forward, and particularly in Melbourne and Sydney, where you have to move rather quickly, you might need to secure the house first, and knowing that you're going to pretty much sell your house. So the idea is that you've got 6 months to sell your house and then pay down the debt. And when the bank does its calculations, depending on which lender, it's either on peak debt or end debt. Now, during that 6-month period, some lenders will allow you to capitalise the interest, so you don't have to make any repayments. And when you sell the home, you can pay down the debt. Other lenders will ask for some sort of repayment. It's usually interest only. Now, is it risky? It can be. You just got to be aware that you have to have sold the property within a 6-month period. And if you're not confident of that, then I'd be thinking twice about that.
And I assume the bank will do bank valuations on both properties to make sure that you're not suddenly thinking you're going to get $1 million when it's only worth 800.
Yeah, they will definitely do that because they don't want to keep that loan-to-value ratio above 80%. They want to keep it below 80%. Now, some banks, if they've done the valuations, they will allow you to capitalise the interest until it hits that 80% loan-to-value ratio. But yeah, in a market like Sydney and Melbourne, it's probably a thing that you may need to consider. Yep. Considering how hot it is, though.
Sounds good. Now, the next question we had was, I currently have 2 investment properties and my own home. I'm really struggling to get a pre-approval to buy my 3rd property, earn a good income and have never defaulted. Do you have any suggestions as to how to increase my borrowing capacity? And that's from Renato in Melbourne. And look, this would be a common question. This is such
a big question, mate, at the moment. Oh, gosh. Yeah, Renato, look, you're not the only one, mate. There's a lot of people out there that are struggling. Look, there's 3 tips that I want to give you at the moment. The first one is it's time to ditch the big 4. What's happened is APRA have basically said if your investment book is growing more than 10%, then do everything you can to curtail it. And so the banks are increasing interest rates, they're making the assessments a lot harder. If you're presenting yourself with an existing interest-only loan, they're converting it to principal and interest. So the big 4 at the moment are booming in terms of their investment book, and they're trying to lower it down. So we need to move to what's called the Tier 2 lenders, perfectly acceptable lenders, ING, AMP, Latrobe, Pepper, all these different lenders that perhaps weren't really front of mind in the beginning. They're the lenders that you need to be going to right now. The second point you need to also, when you speak to your broker, is to find the lenders that will input your expenses at face value. Now, what I mean by that is if you have got an existing investment loan, like you have, then we don't want you to be going to a bank who's going to load that interest-only loan as principal and interest. You want a lender who's going to be putting it in at its face value, at its current value. So if you're currently paying $300 a week as interest-only repayments, that's where you want it set at. All the big 4 banks, the majority of the banks, are loading it from $300 a week to maybe $450 a week. So that's the second tip. And then the third tip is, if possible, try and apply as principal and interest loans. All right, the banks, for the first time in 15 years of me being as a mortgage broker, I have never seen anything like it. I don't know if you heard, Chris, while you were away, but the Commonwealth Bank now said you need to have 20% deposit if you want an interest-only loan. 20% deposit. That's how hard they're getting. So if you can apply as principal and interest loan, I know it may be tough in the first few years, but what it will do is get you across the line and help you get that next investment property.
Wonderful. So some great questions there. Now, for more tips and ideas on buying property and organising your finances, you can always download a copy of my latest book. You can get it absolutely free. Just go to yourempire.com.au. And also, if you'd like our opinion on your strategy or situation, send us some brief details to chris@yourempire.com.au. Now, if you've been following Tom Panos, who comes on here with the Property of the Week, he's just been off with the monks in Greece. And so he hasn't spoken to anyone or touched social media, so I'm not sure if he can survive much longer, but he will be back in a week or 2. But I'm going to be taking you through this week's Property of the Week, and that is at 4 Pine Street in Newtown in New South Wales 2042. Now, our Property of the Week is 3 beds, 2 baths and a lock-up parking for 1 car. It's got dress circle setting in prime North Newtown in a quiet street with a traditional front with LED light and an original fireplace. Now, the galleries of glass and void spaces fill the home with light, and centrepiece stairs split the dining and large living. There's a gourmet stone and gas kitchen, a generous and private alfresco terrace and rear lane access to the lock-up car space. Now, there's 3 large bedrooms, built-in robes, a master with ensuite and additional playroom, study nook or large fully lined storage. The property has got a price guide of $1.9 to $2 million, a rent guide of $1.2 to $1.25 per week, and goes to auction on the 3rd of June. And as always, some fantastic photos there and a potential good opportunity.
What a spectacular looking property.
Very good.
Yeah.
Now, one of the other questions we had during the week that we couldn't get to is, obviously, a lot of the banks are raising the interest rates even though the RBA is staying at hold. Could this be a sign to lock in your rates?
Look, I think it comes down to personal situations. You know, if you're expecting a baby and you're worried about the rates going up, then absolutely consider it. It's not about beating the banks. It's about making sure that you're working to your own budget and your own constraints. So, yes, the banks are putting up the rates, and it's only because they're trying to curtail investment lending. But I would suggest that it's about more you trying to control your household budget. And if you've got a baby coming, if you're worried about losing a job and so forth, then, yeah, perhaps fix it. But I would certainly leave some of it variable. The reason is that you want to have that offset account. Park some money into your offset account, your wages. That way it'll have some effect. So, for example, if you had a $400,000 home
We might have to leave it at that. We're running out of time, but some fantastic advice there, John.
Okay.
And again, goes to show that not all brokers are the same, so you've got to choose a broker that knows what they're doing. Now, thanks for joining us this evening. Until next week, I'm Chris Gray. Good night.
The information featured in this program is general in nature and therefore should not be relied upon. Guests appearing on the program may have commercial arrangements with some of the companies mentioned. Before making any investment, insurance or financial planning decisions, you should consult a licensed professional who can advise whether your decision is appropriate for you.